All right, so this is our second unit. In this unit, what we'll be talking about is organic chemistry. Basically, what we're going to be talking about here are the organic molecules, what it takes to be an organic molecule, and the organic molecules that are necessary um, for life. And we're just going to be kind of diving into that. The biggest thing that you're going to need to know about this section is you're really going to need to make sure that you understand the role that that organic molecule plays. And whenever I say the role, I mean its function. You'll need to be able to know some examples of it, which we'll go through as well. Another thing that you're going to need to be able to know is be able to identify it. You will see some images about these, and you will need to know how to identify them. And I will help give you some tips and tricks on how to do that throughout this. So today, what we're going to be talking about on day one is we're going to be going over what an organic molecule is, and we will also go ahead and talk about nucleic acids, which is a type of organic molecule. Just so that you know, there are four organic molecules, and then we'll also talk about one last thing, which is a certain type of protein at the end of it as well. How I have this set up is to where we'll talk about two things each day so it doesn't overload you too much, because this can be confusing information because it's so new to people at this stage of the game, because this is probably one of the first times that you're actually first hearing about these things. And this is kind of how science and education builds on itself. So first thing we need to know about an organic molecule is organic molecules are carbon-based molecules. Whenever we say that it's a carbon-based molecule, basically we're saying that these are molecules and they must contain carbon. And that's what this C right here signifies. This C is actually talking about from the periodic table that you've learned about in your lower level sciences already. And C is just the symbol given for carbon. The H would be for hydrogen. The O would be for oxygen. This P right here is phosphorus, and this N is nitrogen. Now, right here, I say that organic substances or organic molecules must contain, and it must contain carbon. Carbon is the most essential for them to have. Um, and then what we'll notice here about these four organic molecules that I have listed below, like carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins, if you look at them, they all contain carbon in it. But they also all have hydrogen and oxygen as well. Each one of them has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So, one of the things that you're going to have to do whenever you are trying to decide based on information that I'll give you, a lot of times a fan favorite on this one is to use a table. And if I give you some different molecules, or if I can just give you and I'm going to give you an example of what I mean here in a second, is you'll need to figure out if something's organic or not organic. So the first thing that you're always looking for is carbon. If an element doesn't have carbon in it, and the example I give you right now is like water. Water is H2O. That's its molecular makeup. Well, if you notice whenever I said H2O, it doesn't have carbon in it. So that means that it would not be an organic molecule right off the bat. Okay? Now, but some things do have carbon in it, but they're still not considered organic, such as carbon dioxide, CO2. So, what I try to do here in these notes is I try to give you a way to make it a surefire way. And if you can remember this one thing, it'll make it to where you can figure them all out. What the biggest thing that you're looking for is carbon. That will help you probably eliminate one choice. But if you have multiple choices there that do have carbon and you can't figure it out, an easy way to look for it is if it has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, you know for sure that it is definitely going to be an organic molecule. Now, right here, I also have phosphorus and nitrogen in parentheses. And the reason why is not everything has to have that, such as these nucleic acids, they actually have all five of them. They have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. But proteins don't have the phosphorus there. Also, the reason why I have these listed here is you will need to know which elements each one has in it. Okay, so please make sure you do go over that for your quizzes and for your test as well. So this is what I was talking about, identifying something as being an organic molecule versus an inorganic molecule. So if you notice right here, this one right here, this has carbon, and it has 6 of them. Hydrogen, 12 of those. Oxygen, 6 of those. Because it contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, I know that this is definitely an organic molecule. Now, look right here, it doesn't have to be in that order. It could be carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. It doesn't matter. Now, because I know it contains carbon, there's a good shot it's going to be organic. But whenever I see hydrogen and oxygen, I know for a fact it is. And then down here, of course, I give you one that does have the phosphorus in it as well. Now, over here on this right side where we get to the inorganic molecules, you notice that this does have carbon in it. This is CO2, carbon dioxide. Since there's no hydrogen there, I'm able to discern that, okay, even though it does contain carbon, this is not going to be considered organic because it really needs to have all 3 of those. If we go down to the next one, that's the example I gave before also. That is H2O, that's water. Now, if you go down to the third one, now the third one can get people confused sometimes because whenever they see that C right there, they see Na, C, and a lot of times, depends on how the computer types it and what font it's in, they might say that that's Ci, or rarely do they actually say Cl, even though that is supposed to be a Cl. That's a lowercase l. Well, a lot of students in the past have thought that that C meant, oh, there's carbon in it, so this is organic. Now remember, it needs to have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That is not a C for carbon. That is actually a Cl for chlorine. This is sodium chloride. NaCl is sodium chloride, and that is table salt. Down here at the bottom where we see HCl, well, this is H for hydrogen. This is still Cl for chlorine. This is actually hydrogen chloride. But if you did get confused on that, if you can remember that it also needs to have that O in there, that's a surefire way of not getting mixed up on some of these that might have some of the letters, but it really needs to make sure you have those 3 important ones: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move on to nucleic acids. Now, most of y'all know what a nucleic acid is, you just didn't quite realize it. It's known as DNA and RNA. That's what that Na stands for right there. That Na stands for nucleic acid. So the purpose of DNA and RNA is to store and transmit genetic information. That's what we find inside of your nucleus, inside your cells. You'll also need to know what a nucleic acid is made of. And whenever I say it's made of, what are these long chains made of, their individual subunit. You might also see the term monomer on another slide. I'll have the word monomer written down for you, so you'll kind of see what I mean by that, and we'll kind of go over that prefix later. So it is made up of a nucleotide, and if you notice, it has the same root word there, so that should really help you in identifying that a nucleic acid is made up of nucleotides. So what is a nucleotide? A nucleotide consists of a phosphate group, a pentose sugar, and like a pentagram is a 5-sided geometric object, and that's where it gets its name from. A pentose sugar is a 5-carbon sugar, and it has to have 1 nitrogen base. That nitrogen base could either be A, T, C, G, or U. On the next slide, I actually go over what they mean, and so that should make that a little bit easier for you. That A is for adenine, the T is for thymine, the C is for cytosine, the G is for guanine, and the U is for uracil. And we'll go over that more a lot this year as well. So that really won't be that big of a deal. So some things that you need to definitely know about nucleic acids. So we need to make sure that we know the difference between DNA and RNA. Just to let you know, I'm going to be pulling a lot of questions from this slide, so please make sure that you study this one extra well. So first off, DNA, the purpose of DNA individually is your blueprint for your life. For all your genes, it stores all your genetic information. So whenever we talked about the functions of nucleic acids, we said they store and transmit. Well, the function of DNA is to store genetic information. Another significant characteristic of DNA is that it's double stranded. Now, we talked about that sugar. DNA has a very special sugar called deoxyribose. And if you notice, that it starts with a D there. That's actually what that D stands for. It stands for deoxyribose nucleic acid. The nitrogen bases that it contains is A, T, C, and G. If you notice, there's no U there. That's because only your cell has a U, while DNA has the T, thymine. It has the nitrogen base T, thymine. That is a definite question that you will see. I will ask you which one they have and which one has which. This one, you'll also see this type of information on a couple of more units throughout the year. So you really need to, sorry about that, you really need to put that in your memory. Really store that in. Now let's go down here to RNA. Now RNA, it translates DNA to make proteins. This will actually be an entire unit that we'll go over later on in the year, is how this happens. But for right now, let's just make sure that we know that it transmits genetic information. A good characteristic about RNA is only single stranded. I'm going to actually show you a picture of what they look like in a couple of slides, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And if we look down here, it has the sugar ribose. That's what the R in RNA stands for. It stands for ribonucleic acid. And down here, it contains the nitrogen bases A, U, C, and G. Now you notice it has that U is uracil. They both contain adenine, they both contain cytosine, they both contain guanine. The only thing that changes is that one nitrogen base. All right, so right here I just have a picture of what a nucleotide looks like. So this is that phosphate sugar that both of them have. This is that the phosphate group. This is that pentose sugar here. You see how it's five-sided like a pentagram? Kind of like a home base on a baseball field, or the home plate. And right here, again, a pentose sugar, nitrogen bases, nitrogen bases. If we look down here at this sugar has an oxygen here, while this sugar over here does not. That's where it gets its name from by saying deoxy. We deleted the oxygen from ribose, and that's basically all it is. So this would be a picture of what a nucleotide looks like for RNA, and really how you would have to signify that and how you'd have to recognize it is you need to make sure that you know that it has the U uracil instead of over here it has the T thymine. But you will definitely need to make sure that you know this shape right here, because I will ask you that. And in your notes, in your guided notes, you'll also see that there as well. All right, so this slide, what I'm doing here is I'm actually showing you the whole structure of a DNA molecule here. Now, if you notice, it looks like a twisted ladder. It looks like a twisted ladder, whereas this one over here, it looks like it's missing part of the ladder, right? This is what we meant by double-stranded versus single-stranded. This has two ribbons going around it, whereas this one's missing one of the sides. So that's what we mean by double versus single-stranded. Here's the actual spelling of those nitrogen bases: cytosine, guanine, adenine, thymine. And over here you'll see uracil. All right. So some other things I want to go over on this slide just real quick. Right here, you see how it says base pair? Well, this right here says yellow and this side is green. Well, if you notice, cytosine is yellow and guanine is green. And if you notice here, yellow and green are still paired, yellow and green are still paired. Well, what this is saying, and this isn't going to be really important right now, but this is going to be a massive important thing later on in the year, is we're saying that cytosine and guanine, they go together. They're kind of like keys in a lock. They fit together. Now, right here we have adenine and thymine, blue and red. Well, look right here, blue and red connected together, blue and red connected together. Those two go together as well. Right here in the middle, you see where it says sugar phosphate backbone? That's what this ribbon is. All right, so I'm going to go back one slide. Whenever it says the sugar phosphate backbone, we're saying that that ribbon is made up of this phosphate group and this sugar group. The only thing that's out in the middle are the base pairs, or we can just say the nitrogen bases. That's these things right here. These nitrogen bases are what are out in the middle. So those would be like the steps of the ladder. This would be like the sides of the ladder. And the sides of the ladder are the sugar and the phosphate. That will be a question that you will see either on your quiz or on your summative test. All right, so that's all for day one. So let's have a quick review real quick. So right here, what are the four main organic molecules living organisms need? You're going to need your nucleic acids. You're going to need carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Those are your four organic molecules. What elements make up each one of these? So you are going to need to know that. Remember, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen have to make up all of them. Those are in all four of them. Well, I know that the nucleic acid has nitrogen because it has those nitrogen bases and it has the phosphate group, so it has a phosphorus as well. Protein, on the other hand, it does not have the phosphorus, it only has the nitrogen. Which element must be present in order to identify a molecule as organic? Well, what must be present is carbon, but we know that we're also going to look for that hydrogen and that oxygen molecule as well. Or that hydrogen and oxygen element. What is the function of a nucleic acid? To store and transmit genetic information. You might also see terms like hereditary information. It's all the same thing, or your genes, your traits. And by genes, we mean GENES, not your Levi's. What is the subunit of a nucleic acid called? It's called a nucleotide. You'll need to make sure you know the three parts. The three parts of it is going to be the phosphate group, the pentose sugar, know which one goes with which. And then also you need to make sure that you, the nitrogen base, know which nitrogen bases go with DNA, which nitrogen bases go with RNA. And that comes down here to this last one where it says DNA, know the differences between DNA and RNA. There are four main differences. The sugar, DNA has deoxyribose, RNA has ribose. You also have the nitrogen bases. DNA has thymine, while RNA has uracil instead. They both have that A, C, and G. Their function is different. DNA stores while RNA transmits the genetic information. And DNA is double-sided while RNA is single-sided. All right, so that should be it. And if you need to review over this some more, please do so. And don't forget, you do have quizzes that you can go to have some practice questions on this as well. And if you have any questions, just email me.